Welcome back to TBRD. This afternoon on the way home from work, I'm going to be discussing the Dynamic Pro riding mode, or more specifically, the Dynamic Electronic Suspension and Chassis Adjustment, or what is otherwise known as ESA Pro. On my last vlog, I had a question from a viewer about the ESA mode and some of the settings and how that interfaces with the Dynamic Pro engine setup, and essentially the different functions of Dynamic Pro and what you can do with that, and how the two things kind of coexist. As I get started talking about the DESA and the Dynamic Pro mode, I just wanted to point out that I absolutely love these functions and love the fact that you can really dial things in on Dynamic Pro. I think all the settings kind of cause the casual rider or someone who might be interested in the bike but doesn't know a lot about those different technologies, it might kind of put them off. I would say, you know, I can't claim to understand everything that they do, but what I would say is it's a very easy entry. You can, you know, there's different riding modes that are set on the bike. So if I shuffle through the mode, there's rain, there's road, there's dynamic, and then there's a Dynamic Pro setting on this particular bike and the package that it has. And each one of those modes has kind of pre-programmed riding states, if you will, into them. And under Dynamic Pro, you can adjust all of those different settings to your liking, or you can turn them off entirely. The only caution that I would have to anybody is, if you're unfamiliar with the bike, turning around riding it in Dynamic Pro and having all of those different settings set to off could come back to bite you if you're a little ham-fisted and you've got all your riding aids off. And I know other people would chime in and say, hey, you know, I learned to ride before all that stuff was available, and you know, your traction control was your right wrist, etc., so on and so forth. All I'm saying is the technology is there for a reason, particularly when it comes to ABS, traction control. They can really save you in a difficult situation. So I wouldn't recommend turning those things off unless you're 100% confident on the vehicle, in the riding conditions, and with your own riding skill. That being said, I really like the fact that you can program them and they're customizable. So when we're talking about the DESA, or the Dynamic Electronic Suspension Adjustment, that can be actuated here on your left handlebar. So when I click this and hold it down, you'll see this pops up and it says Dynamic on the left, Auto on the right. So the left side is referring to, this left side where it says Dynamic is referring to the damping, and there's essentially two settings. I'm actually going to pull over up here so we can shuffle through that menu and I can talk a little bit more about it and focus on it in a safe manner here. Alright, now that we're pulled over here, you'll see that I have the motorcycle running, and what I was saying was, if you push this button down, it's going to pop this menu up. There's your damping on the left, and it says, I hit it again, Dynamic, and if I hit the button again, it'll say Road. So you've got two settings on this particular bike. You've got Dynamic and you've got Road. Road setting is essentially a bit more casual and soft setting as far as your damping is concerned. So you can see here as I click this button, if I hold it down, I get Auto and Min. Those are my two selections that I have as an option for my rear spring preload, if you will. You should not ride around on Min. Minimum is basically there to lower the height in terms of stepping over and getting on and off the bike that makes that easier. You should be riding around in Auto. When you're in the Auto setting, the motorcycle, when you start it and as you're riding around, is taking readings off of the compression of the rear wheel. And what it's doing is making sure that you're always at the correct ride height based off of how far that rear wheel is compressed. The damping is also automatically adjusted as you ride. Using ride height sensors, then Dynamic ESA is taking chassis readings effectively to ensure that you're at the correct ride height, and the way that it makes adjustments is through the EDC valves. As a result, the chassis is adjusted to the conditions of the surface. So that's, in a nutshell, your settings here as far as your damping and your spring preload. Now, if we get into the menu, and you do that by clicking down on the menu, I can then use my wheel to navigate over, and I get into settings. I go into vehicle settings, and I scroll down to Pro Riding, Dynamic Pro Riding Mode. I can get into this menu, and inside of this menu I can adjust everything from my engine. So right now I have it set to Dynamic Pro. My engine is set to optimum throttle response, max torque. You can adjust that. If I scroll up, it'll say Dynamic Optimum Throttle Response, reduced torque in low gears. Gentle throttle response, maximum torque. Source, rain, gentle throttle response, reduced torque in low gears. So this has 4 riding modes, and essentially when you get in here under the engine, there's 4 settings that you can set under Dynamic Pro. If you set it at 4, that's like riding around in the rain mode. You set it at 3, that's like riding around in in the road mode. If you set it at 2, that's equivalent to riding around in the dynamic setting mode. And set at 1, that's the Dynamic Pro mode. So you can set that engine setting in Dynamic Pro for however you want it. Let me back out of that. Engine braking. So your engine braking action. Currently I have mine set to 2, which is the dynamic average engine brake effect. I'm just used to riding around that way, so I left it there. I'm not riding on the track where maybe I wouldn't want that setting so high, and so you can adjust that. Traction control. Under Dynamic Pro, I have it set to maximum performance, so not a ton of traction control, but if I spin it up, I can have dynamic, which is a little more intervention from my traction control. On the road setting, it would be high stability, and under rain, it would be maximum. So I keep mine set to maximum performance when I'm riding around, or dynamic. I'll leave it at dynamic for now. All right, going back out, you've got wheelie control and your wheelie behavior. Mine currently is set to high wheelie possible, minimum support. So basically your wheelie support is going to cut the front or cut the rear brake in, right? It's going to apply the rear brake for you when the wheel gets to a certain height. Under high wheelie possible, there's not a whole lot of support, but you can set it to dynamic, so it's basically like a power wheelie, and then it's going to automatically apply that, the settings and the brake to give you optimum propulsion with a lower wheelie. Or you can set it to maximum stability, which basically is not going to allow you to wheelie the bike at all, or allow the bike to wheelie. And then of course you can go through ABS. I always keep my ABS on pretty substantially. I have it to road setting because I'm not out there hooning around. I really like to have the ABS just to kind of as a safety net in case, for whatever reason, whether it's wet leaves or whatever it may be. This time of year, wet leaves is certainly a possibility. I'll have my ABS kick in, but you can adjust that, and you can adjust it on the front and the rear. So the question that I had was on the vlog was, can you set your riding modes and the suspension separately? And the answer to that question is yes. I can ride around in Dynamic Pro riding mode, and if I hit my suspension button, you can see I'm in road. So I can leave that in road. Typically I'm not in road. I think it's because I was just playing around with it. But I can set it to dynamic, which is what I like to have it set as far as the damping goes. But if you want to, you can set it to road even while you're riding around the Dynamic Pro mode. All right, we are back out on the road. So what I was saying was, all of these electronic aids I think are exceptionally helpful. To me, they add a lot of individuality and programmability to your ride and to your riding experience, and that is part of why I love this bike and similar bikes. They give you that option. It certainly does not come without a premium in price, but I think it definitely allows you to adjust your experience really like no other bike. So the Multistrada this bike, anything that's got that level of programmability, I think is really going to allow you to tailor your ride to the way you want it. It should not intimidate you. If you are unsure of how something works, there's a ton of support out there, whether it's through the forums or really even just reading through your owner's manual is going to help you figure that out. And what I recommend is ride around with the settings set to a little bit more intrusive until you find their boundaries. What I like to do when I get on a new bike, especially like this, that is really powerful, is I will wait until I feel comfortable with it. And basically I program it to cut in at a pretty low level. And as I start to find those thresholds, I will program it back and program it back further until I know I'm fully comfortable on the settings that I have on the bike. And to me, that's the safest and most fun way to do it, because I can find kind of where those boundaries are. The traction control itself, I always have a good time trying to find those boundaries. And what I like to do with that is when it's a rainy day, I will get out, find some rises in the road and kind of hammer it a little bit harder until I can feel that rear wheel start to slip and I can see the readings come in on the traction control under the sports screen and get a sense for how much intervention that is adding. But anyways, I'm kind of going down a wormhole at this point. I really just wanted to talk a little bit about Dynamic ESA today and Dynamic Pro riding mode. I'm going to cover more in depth some topics on the Dynamic Pro riding mode when it comes into engine braking, ABS, the traction control in later videos. But if you like what I'm doing and this video has been helpful to you in any sort of way, please leave me a comment and definitely like and subscribe to the channel. It would be greatly appreciated. As I like to say, until next time, keep the throttle back, the rubber down, and enjoy the ride.